Well, good morning and welcome back, Mobile, and all of our friends on the Gulf Coast. We're so glad you decided to join us again for another episode of the Echo Stop Live podcast. I'm Kevin, and I'm here with my good friend Curtis.
Morning.
Curtis, I got a surprise for you.
Well, how are you doing, first of all?
Well, I'm doing great, but I'm even doing better because I have an amazing surprise for you.
What's that surprise?
We have a guest with us today in the studio. Now, you probably can't see this person, but they're sitting right here.
I don't see him.
Okay. I did. Well, here. Well, let me go ahead and make them visible to everybody that's watching. But we have with us Director Lawrence Battiste, the Public Safety Director for City of Mobile, and we're super excited because today's topic is to talk about imagining a safer city. And you can't really fathom what an imaginary idea would be without really having the concept behind it. And when you turn that concept into reality, that's why this show is so important, because we're taking these ideas of imagination and we're actually putting them into practice. And there takes a lot of people to do that.
Takes absolutely a lot of people and a lot of proactive minds, people who are committed to envisioning a place where everyone prospers, everyone's safe, and everyone has the flexibility to move about their day and feel comfortable in it and know that their families are safe.
Awesome. Well, Director, we are so glad you're here.
Well, I am so glad to be here, listening and watching you guys banter back and forth.
Well, we really enjoy our conversations, but we do have a little bit of business we want to get down to today, and we certainly want to talk about what it really means here. And I know I want to get to the heart of what imagining a safer city looks like, but before I do that, before I get to the heart of that, I wanted to kind of get to the heart of Lawrence Battiste. So tell us, if you don't mind, for everybody that's listening, what drives you really to be part of this effort to make Mobile the safest city it can be?
I guess, first of all, my faith in God, understanding that having hope is something that can be contagious, and just believing that, the community that I grew up in can continue to improve and be a better community and be a beacon for the entire world to see. And working with guys like you and Curtis, one of the things that, and particularly as we began this moment today, the fact that there are people on your team, that we begin a segment like this with prayer, asking God to be in the midst of what we do here and to give us guidance and make sure that we are focused on His agenda, not just our agenda.
Absolutely.
I think that's so important, and you said something in there, in the city that you grew up in, mm-hmm. and I find that interesting because a lot of times we have people that come and go and mm-hmm. and move to different places, and I know you've had a stint in a lot of different places doing different things, but the fact that you're back here, what's it mean to you to be able to be part of something in your hometown?
As a little boy growing up, my vision was not ever to be in this type of a leadership role. In fact, if my mom was here, she'd say, my son wanted to work on the back of a garbage truck. and the reality of it is that no matter where you work in this city or what you do in this city, you have an opportunity to help the city move forward. And so just knowing that I have an opportunity to play a large role in helping us move forward and making the city safer means the world to me.
And Curtis, I know you've ventured into so many different programs that are really vital in providing services, and more than just the services. We have services and there's services available, but it's that connection to the services.
Absolutely. There has to be a connection. We have to make people feel like they're stakeholders in what we do. Law enforcement in and of itself, and we all say it every day, law enforcement can't do it by itself. Mm-hmm. We know that. But we need others to know that also, and they need to know that we rely on them to be that beacon, to be that person who steps out with courage and understanding that community is more than just one person, is many people, And it's great to know that we are striving to try to get the community to realize how valuable they are to us.
So you said something important there. You said community, and talk about striving for a better place. So what let's talk about community for a minute. What is their role in providing efforts towards making this a safer city versus the police? How would you define the two different roles, Director?
So when I think of community, I think of the idea of people living in a neighborhood and people seeing something that's out of place. And when they see the thing that's out of place, rather than calling somebody to come fix it, they do the things that they can do to try to fix it themselves. The police's role, on the other hand, is really to be more a deterrent, in particular a deterrent to crime and criminal behavior. But it's truly the community's responsibility to fix the things that are happening in their primary sphere of control, and to try to make sure that those things don't happen. If there's litter in the yard, get up the litter. If somebody's yard needs to be cut, if there's a neighbor there to help them cut their yard, if somebody's child needs a pair of shoes and it's a strong, vibrant community and you know each other, you're willing to help that person get a pair of shoes. And those things strengthen a community. That means that when times get tough in that neighborhood, they galvanize themselves because they know each other and they do the things that need to be done.
You make me think about, as a kid, my parents both worked, so what do they call those, latchkey kids?
Date yourself.
Yeah, I know, really, right? But you would go home at the end of the day after school, and your neighbors, your retired neighbors, would actually see you out and about, and if you were doing anything that was remotely wrong, like riding your bike in the street, that was me. Okay. I would get yelled at.
I'm going to need to see pictures to verify
You don't
this.
want to see that, man. That was ugly. But I would get yelled at because they knew that my parents weren't home and that I didn't need to be in the street riding my bike.
Right.
So, that sense of neighborhood, that sense of community is something that I hope that we can rekindle. And if not rekindle, create.
So I have an impromptu test. Are you willing to take an impromptu test?
Don't
Is there a
do it.
pass or fail?
It is a pass or fail. It's one question. It's a one question test. But I have an impromptu test for you guys, and you both can take the same test. Is this a police problem only? Does the community solely rely on the police to solve this problem, or does the community play a role in this issue that we're dealing with, specifically with gun violence?
I'm glad you said that because as I'm sitting here looking at your paperwork here, our theme is it
So
takes
you're
all of
cheating
us.
on this
It
test.
takes all of us.
Absolutely
Okay,
does,
so
yeah.
if I said it was a police problem, we can't say it takes all of us. If I said it was a community problem, I can't say it takes all of us. It literally takes all of us. We can't point the finger at any one person. It's biblical. If I point the finger at you, I got three others pointing back at me. The reality of it takes all of us to be engaged in the process of changing our community.
And Courtesy gave away the answer, but would you agree with the answer to this test?
I would go a step further, too, for those in law enforcement who should be familiar with Sir Robert Peel. We're going to actually start educating the community on Sir Robert Peel.
So we're having an SRP moment today.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. But the community plays a part or a role that is very similar to the police. And the police play a role very similar to the community because it's interchangeable. It's all the same. No one is less than the other. One is actually tasked with doing something that the others are not paid to do. But we all have a sense of obligation and responsibility to do the right thing.
I have another surprise for you.
What's that?
Well, I'm going to pull out my little handy-dandy door knocker that we have here. We have door knockers. Now, this may seem like your normal door knocker, but this is not. This is literally a key to becoming part of the team to making Mobile a safer city. It has a phone number on it, and that phone number is 844-251-0644, and that is our anonymous tip line. And also, during the show, as I usually like to mention, that we have an email account, and you can send in questions, and we'll answer live questions on the show, and it's echostoplive@gmail.com. That's echostoplive@gmail.com. We'll answer questions, but this door knocker is something I want to come back and talk to you guys about here in just a minute. But before we do that, we've got a little video we'd like to show, and somebody you might recognize from our studios in it. So when you watch that video, director, you did a great job. I was actually out there the day that they filmed that video, and what you saw, hopefully, in the engagement piece, but what you really saw behind the scenes was an affected community that was affected by our visit, and I really feel like the video shows that, but some of the things that we're talking about today, I think, really demonstrate that. I wanted to spend just a minute with you and talk about this door knocker and some of the things that police can do better to communicate and interact and make their presence more known in the community. And where do you see door knockers and sort of reaching out, letting people know that we're there and we want to hear from them?
So the door knockers, for one, is really a tool for us to truly engage. It becomes a conversation piece. We knock on the door. Maybe somebody answers the door. Maybe somebody doesn't answer the door. If they didn't answer the door, at least we leave something to let them know that the police showed up or somebody showed up at your home today and they want to engage you about the things that are happening in your community. And here's other ways for you to get engaged utilizing your door knocks. There's a QR code that they can scan to send information.
You got to use your phone for that, Curtis, just so you know.
And again, the big piece here is the opportunity for law enforcement officers to get to know the people in the areas that they're patrolling. They get to know Miss Mary. They get to know Miss Hendricks. They get to know Miss Battiste. They get, they get to know Mr. and Mrs. Graves because they knock on the door. They know, the neighborhood knows the officer that's patrolling their neighborhood, and the officer knows the people that are living in the neighborhood that he or she is patrolling.
That is so important because nowadays we don't have that sense of community connection. We have to create it because every city in the country, law enforcement comes from all over the country to police in a particular community because of the opportunity to actually be a part of a community. But it takes law enforcement as well as the community to actually understand the importance of that because unlike you and I, some people are not from the community that are in law enforcement, and some who live in the community are not necessarily people who have always lived in the community. So it's so important that we try to find ways of connecting with one another.
Well, the only other thing I like to say about the door knocks, it'll help us remove barriers.
Right.
I've often heard people in the community say, well, the officer's driving down the street with the windows up in the car and they never say anything. And the officer says, I'm driving down the street and Miss Mary's sitting on the porch, and when I get ready to get out of the car and go knock, she gets up and she goes inside so she doesn't have to converse with me. This helps us remove barriers, artificial barriers that have been put in place that prohibit us from developing relationships. We have to be intentional about our approach to remove those barriers.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I just want you to confirm this because I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing you say is good. Is you want to hear from the community. You
Yes.
want the community to engage with us, right, wrong, or indifferent. We need to hear what's on their mind and on their heart, right?
We're not perfect people, and so in law enforcement, and so we need the community to engage with us. We have to have their participation in order for us to provide better service back to them.
And I will say this, one of the things that we talk about all the time is just how little response we get sometimes from the community when bad things are happening. And understanding that there are many reasons why we don't get the response back that we expect or we hope to get back from the community. And what we want to do is have intentional dialogue with the community to talk about those things, to figure out what are those things that are keeping you from calling the police.
Right.
But we've said this, and I say this in almost every episode that we've had of the first few weeks, that the problem we're really battling is a perception problem. It's not, certainly there's violent incidents, but our perception problem is actually the biggest battle we have. And what I'm hearing you and the director say is, if law enforcement goes out there with a certain mindset, thinking the problem is one thing and it's really something else, they're not solving the problem. And if the community is aggravated or agitated or doesn't feel they're getting any recourse in their issues, but they're addressing it through a different mindset than what the police are thinking, we're actually not talking to each other, we're talking past each other.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And so that's awesome. And I feel like this door knocker, as simple as it is, and I love what you said, Director, when you said that it creates a way to get around these barriers. Is it opens the first step in dialogue, and they don't have to always call the anonymous number. They can call the main number and make suggestions. They can email folks. They can get on our Facebook page for Echo Stop Live and send in comments. And it's funny that I mentioned that because we actually have a follower of ours that's been watching the podcast that actually wrote in a community question onto our Facebook page, which is the Echo Stop Live Facebook page. But I wanted to use that as our question as we continue to get questions on our Gmail account also. There's several ways to send them in, but Miss Brenda from Mobile wrote in, and she said that in some states, when youth are found in possession of firearms, the parents face charges. Or she elaborates to ask about what happens to juveniles who are out after hours. Are the parents being held? And I know these are conversations that have been had lately. You know, who's accountable and who's held responsible. So, Director, I might let you get the first swing at that one if you'd like to send some comments for Miss Brenda.
You know, my experience has been, in particular, I spent 5 years as a chief juvenile probation officer with the youth court here in the city of Mobile. And sometimes we oversimplify what should happen when it comes to addressing certain issues. Like in particular, with the first part of the question, you know, when a firearm is found in a child's possession, there are a lot of good parents out there that are doing all they can to make sure that their children are not doing bad things. That don't mean that their children won't do bad things. You know, I've been on the other end where a parent drops a kid off at school in the morning. He walks in the front door and walks out the back door. So how do you hold a parent accountable for that? You know, what you try to do is get the parent to work with the system so that you can do a better job of making sure that child stays in place wherever the parent drops them off. In particular, in their homes, you know, we'd hope parents would be more engaging and checking their bedrooms and things of that nature there. But there are some children that's going to find a way to commit bad offenses, and the parents have zero knowledge. So we don't want to penalize parents in those situations when they are truly doing everything that they can. Now, but I've also been on the other side of the fence where I clearly believe that we need to hold parents accountable, in particular when we can show that parents are complicit in the behavior of the child.
But for clarity, let's make sure that we clarify Ms. Brenda's question as best we can too. And what you just said is spot on. But I would say that I'm not aware of any states that actually penalize parents for children being in possession of firearms. There are mitigating circumstances, of course. There are things that may mitigate it where it ends up leading to something of that sort. But, and you guys help me out because
I'm going to throw in the third mix, and I think this is a great question. It really goes to a legal side, and,
right.
and I'm certainly not an attorney, but it seems to me if we're asking should the states hold the parents accountable, I think my opinion of one of the things that we can do that's great to address these problems is instead of creating laws that maybe hold someone accountable for something that they had no knowledge of, can we create laws that empower law enforcement in the community to get more involved? Can we do things that allow us to prevent the violent incident from ever even occurring? And so how do we know when these things are happening? And earlier you said it takes all of us. And I always add something to something, right? So it takes all of us, but I think really what we're saying is it takes all of us, to get involved. And I think that involves the parents getting involved at home. It involves faith-based organizations when they hear and see things. It involves our schools and school administrators. We have an amazing relationship with the public school system here in Mobile County and all of our surrounding entities for that matter. And I think all of us collaboratively having this discussion really is what takes all of us, is sort of a community within the community. And so I thought that's a great question.
It was. Yeah.
And you know, on these new and emerging sort of topics where laws haven't really caught up to what's happening, I think it's interesting from a social piece. But, you know, we can't always wait for that. We need to find ways to intervene. We need to find ways to have honest conversations. I know I have several presentations scheduled at schools talking to parents about things they can do to get more involved. And sometimes it's a parent that just wants to have knowledge of what can I do as a parent. And, you know, unfortunately, we've come sort of past this parent, and we have certain situations where we become too friendly with you know, we're in the friend role, not the parent role, and we really have to drive back to the parent role of, you know, what's worse, you know, having more involvement or having to follow up after something unfortunately has happened. And that's a social question that I get is yet to be completely answered. But that really talks about police-community relationships too. How do we engage with parents, Director? Whether it's crime prevention or community police relationships, how do we engage with parents when they are in the middle of these situations?
So I think parents, again, it's all about removing the barriers to being able to communicate. Parents that find themselves in difficult situations and not knowing how to navigate a particular situation, they need to know that they can walk into a place and not be judged about their ability to parent. They need to be able to go in and ask questions and be able to be given answers that helps them overcome whatever deficiencies that they have. And so again, we have to remove the barriers that prevent people from wanting to go and ask questions and to learn about how to be better at what it is that they're doing. Nobody wants to be ridiculed. Nobody wants to be accused of, not being very good at a particular task. And they need to be able to do it. They need to be able to ask for help without being condemned. And so I think that's one of the things that we're trying to do is that let people know that from a public safety perspective, we want you to be able to ask for help. We want you to know that when you ask for help, we're going to do all that we can do to make sure that we point you in the right direction, even if we have to hold your hand and walk you to that place in some cases to get you the help that you need so that you can become a better parent or become a better citizen in the city of Mobile.
I like to tell people all the time that there's no perfect parent. And like many professions, you have to practice. Being a parent, you have to practice. It's not necessarily a roadmap that leads to you being the best parent on the planet. However, it is important to understand that we practice being a better parent, making sure that we, before someone else decides that they're going to critique us as a parent, critique ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So does podcasting fall into the critique category?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we're critiquing you right now.
Well, I hope I score high. I'm gonna have to review the report card before we publish it out there. But this is such an interesting conversation because we've raised so many topics that I feel like go to the heart of not just what we're doing in the community, but what's happening in individuals' homes. And it's rare because from a police perspective, generally the community sees the police staying out of the home, right? Police do sort of community patrol. Mom and dad or whoever's in the house leads that household. But here we're actually having a conversation. And if we're talking about knocking down barriers, we have to have that discussion of how do you transcend from what's happening in the home to what's happening in the community, because they're directly correlated.
Directly correlated. There has to be a crossover there because nothing that happens in a home, everything that happens in a home eventually finds its way into the community that a person lives in. I mean, if it's good, if it's bad, it finds its way into the community. And it's almost like the peer pressure that we talk about in schools. Kids go to school, no matter how good a parent has parented at home, when that child goes to school, he's going to interact with other students, and sooner or later, some of the things that they learn from school is going to rub off on them, and they're going to bring it back into the home. And so
in the academic profession, there's a thing called the social ecological model, and it's like a ripple, and it starts in the center, and it moves outward if there are not mitigating things that take place and making sure that whatever is wrong is addressed in the core of where it originated. Right. Otherwise, it goes out from the home to the community, to the school, to society at large.
And you really come back to the four corners of Operation Equistop. In a sense, you're talking about the prevention and the deterrence piece. And just as the director was saying, I know he's helped support and initiated some programs that you even have in the schools and the communities, countless programs, as a matter of fact, some of which have gone national. Right. So there are things happening, maybe behind the scenes, maybe only a certain segment of the society sees it because they have children in schools, but as a community as a whole, we are doing things to address these relationships. Well, that's really great. I wanted to take just a second and kind of make a couple of announcements because, everybody's always excited about what we're going to talk about next. But Curtis, you might could elaborate on this, but we have some community surveys that are happening right now, as a matter of fact, this month and in November. Real quick, before we wind down, where do you see those surveys paying off and what type of benefit?
Well, more than anything, it'll be about intentional interaction with the community, getting a chance to talk to the community about things that matter to them relative to safety in their community, while at the same time taking in the opportunity to say, let's follow up on your concerns. We make the initial contact to talk about those things that are important to everyone. I tell people all the time, every zip code is important, okay? Every zip code. But we want to make sure that every person in the zip codes that we're reaching out to as we move forward is that they know that we care about their voice. And not just care about their voice, but we want to make sure also that we follow through with their concerns.
Well, that's awesome, and I feel like that's gonna really open up some eyes and tell us how we're doing with really taking down these barriers. It's going to let us know what the success is. I want to send out a reminder before we wind down and just remind everybody that if you have an anonymous tip, 844-251-0644, 844-251-0644. And, of course, we're happy to take your questions even after the show. We may use them on another later show, and that's echostoplive@gmail.com. But, Director Battiste, I really wanted to thank you for just spending a little bit of time with us. I know I tried to get you a cup of coffee, and Curtis was stingy with the coffee this morning, so you had to come in here without it. But we appreciate you spending time. Any last minute words for our viewers?
I just want to thank the community, and I want to thank the group of men and women that are assembled in this room and here for the vision of sharing with the community in the way that you guys are doing. So thank you guys for that.
Well, we are super happy and blessed that you are participating with us, and we're grateful. So on behalf of Curtis and myself and the director and the rest of our crew here, we wanted to say thank you for joining us at the Echo Stop Live podcast. We'll see you next Friday at 8:30 in the morning. Until then, be safe and send us your questions, and we hope to see you then. Have a great weekend.